Let's try this again. Hello everybody, welcome back to the tennis vlog. I would have said for the first time during the Australian Open, but I just tried a live stream and that one crashed, which is typical, so hopefully we don't have the same problems here. Thank you to everyone that watched my preview video for the tournament. I will be making some references to that and to predictions that I made. But the main purpose of this video is to review the first week of the Australian Open, which has now drawn to a close. Third round play has ended, with the help of you and your questions. So if you do have questions, send them in quickly. I don't plan on hanging around too long on what is tonight for me, so I'm hoping to keep this to about half an hour. Thank you to people that sent questions in advance, and if you do have questions, get them in quickly. Now, I was away for the first week of the Australian Open. For those who watched my previous video all the way to the end, and thank you if you did, you'll have heard me say that I was working at a junior event in the UK. That was really interesting. Lots of high-profile, big-name former champions that have been competing at the Australian Open. So while that was a great week, it does mean that I have not been watching the Australian Open during the first week as intensely as I usually would. So no full nights sat up with 3 to 4 matches on at the same time. That said, I have just about kept on top of things, so I won't spend ages discussing questions or situations that I can't give adequate insight in, but I will try and answer your questions as best I can. Thank you to everyone joining the stream now. If you want to, share the link, because I did share the previous link and obviously that video crashed. So if you want to share this on Twitter or whatever social media you have so people know to come here and join, then that would be great. And if you're not here live, that is fine. All being well, if this doesn't crash again, this stream will be able to be watched back. Thank you for the support, everyone. And happy Australia Day for those for whom it is already the 26th of January. I'm not quite there yet, but I've set up accordingly, so happy Australia Day if it's applicable to you at the moment. And let's quickly summarise what's happened during the first week of the Australian Open. All of the big three still in. 2 of them looking strong, 1 of them squeezing through, but that might be just what he needs. We'll come to that soon. Big names dropping left, right, and centre in the women's draw, which is as per usual, I guess, but we'll dissect those results a little more. Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka obviously out. Now, to address my previous video, as you will know, I did quite a bit of commentary to start the year off at the ASB Classic in Auckland and the Hobart International in Tasmania. And because I was doing commentary, I was not tremendously on top of the tennis outside of what I was commentating on. So I made instinctive predictions for this event based on my previously collected knowledge, based on knowledge of results of players leading into the Australian Open, and hoped for the best. Did not go quite so well as my US Open predictions. I called Serena and Osaka as the 2 women I instinctively felt had a good shot at the title. I called Madison Keys as my dark horse. All 3 of them out, so typical once again. But on the men's side, I did say that the big 3 are frontrunners, which is easy to say, with Djokovic and Federer looking the stronger. And I called Milos Raonic as my dark horse. Well, Raonic just took Stefanos Tsitsipas, last year's semi-finalist, out in straight sets and is into the 4th round. So thank the ATP for not quite making me look like an idiot just yet. So let's get to your questions. I'll come to some of the ones that were sent in previously. And yeah, let's try and keep this to half an hour today. So let's get straight to the juicy details. Quite a long question here, so I'll read it all out and then I'll go through bit by bit to each part of it. The question is, you said last year that you didn't like the Coco Gauff hype as it was over the top. This person agrees with me, so thank you for that. How do you feel about her win over Naomi Osaka, and should the hype continue? Also, what do you think about Osaka's mental state? Her on-court behaviour has hit a new low this year. Is it her coach who isn't working well with her? This person thinks that she should have stuck with Sasha Buy-in. He's saying, what is he doing that other coaches have failed to do with her? Okay, start with the first bit. I didn't like the Coco Gauff hype last year. I made it quite clear. I made it clear that I thought she was the real deal, but I thought that people were getting carried away and overrating her as she is at the moment. So the first part of this question is, how do I feel about her win over Naomi Osaka, and should the hype continue? I'll tie that in with, what do you think about Naomi Osaka's mental state? Okay, I did watch that match back. I didn't see it live. I woke up as Osaka was going down, and to be honest, I was pretty surprised, because while Gauff has a ton of potential, she is not the player that Osaka is at the moment by a long shot. So Osaka should have had that one in straights, no questions asked. Coco Gauff obviously drew Venus again, first round, as she did at Wimbledon. Got the win, straight sets, as she did at Wimbledon. So full credit to her. I had her beating Venus again for several reasons. Firstly, the fact that this is Coco Gauff on a big Grand Slam stage, surrounded by the team that have mentally prepared her for these moments for years. This was the game plan. This is a fantastic draw for her. You know, she's been mentally prepared for these moments. Let's take her age out of the equation. She's athletic, she's talented, and she has a poise that is really the most impressive element of her game at the moment. It's not the fact that she can hit big, because I don't think she's necessarily a big hitter at the moment, which I will come to. It is the fact that she handles everything with such maturity and such calmness. And for that reason, I had her beating Venus, because Venus had not played this year that I can recall, has not played in some time, is more tired, more injured at this point in her career. 2017, a phenomenal year for Venus, but the last couple of years she's really struggled to get her form going, and right at the beginning of a new season, that was a nasty, nasty opener, and once again, all the pressure on Venus Williams' shoulders as the 7-time Grand Slam champion, as the former champion of this event, and she just didn't have the form for that. So was not surprised by Gauff coming through that, or by the manner in which she beat Sorana Castello, which bore resemblance to her win over Polona Herzog at Wimbledon. Once again, a more accomplished, more long-time pro player who hasn't really ever hit the heights, who was likely to feel the pressure when in a winning position, as Castello clearly did. But let's get to the Osaka match, because that's really what the question was about, and already I'm rambling. How did I feel about her win over Osaka? Honestly, credit to Gauff for putting the ball in the court, but that's all she really had to do. And when I saw this surface result, I thought, okay, she does it again, has the head for the occasion. Osaka can't have played that well. I watched it back, and honestly, Naomi Osaka was dreadful, truly dreadful. And I lean away from using that kind of language, because honestly, to an extent, it feels disrespectful. Could I get up there and produce that kind of standard? No. And because when you say words like dreadful or atrocious or awful, there doesn't seem to be any depth of analysis to it. There's no dissecting of tactics or what was done well or what was done average or what was done bad. But to be honest, I have my match notes for that match here. All it says is Osaka tragic. I could not find anything to analyze. She missed backhand after backhand. Everything was either Osaka hitting her mark, but mostly, for the majority of that clash, Osaka missing the court or hitting the net. I've not seen her play that badly, apart from maybe the time I watched her get beaten, I think 6-1, 6-1 in an outside court and a grass court a few years ago. Not good at all. And Gauff just had to put the ball in the court, which she did, and which she does well. The thing with Gauff is that, no, let's talk about Osaka's mental state first. I think this result encapsulated everything that is wrong with the Coco Gauff hype, and that has been over the past year. Gauff, her team, the media, the people that schedule these things and put her on the show courts as an unseeded 15-year-old when Grand Slam champions and seeded players are elsewhere, they've created this thing that players aren't able to handle. They step out on court, and I think, as Osaka said herself, no one wants to lose to a 15-year-old. Her opponents are going to pieces because of this this thing that the media, that her team, everyone involved has created. You know, Coco Gauff, yes, is a talented player and has been since she was 13 and making junior slam finals, but she's had a helping hand here because she literally just had to put the ball in the court against Osaka. I don't need deeper analysis than that. That is what happened. So moving on, what do I think about Osaka's mental state? Really bad, particularly for the defending champion, a woman that stepped up against the likes of Serena Williams time and again, who's won multiple Grand Slam titles. She got a taste of what it was like to be Serena Williams out there, I think, Osaka. When Osaka stepped out to face Serena at Indian Wells and then in the US Open final, I think she was finally in the shoes of Serena, facing a young opponent that had been hyped in a matchup that had been bigged up. And yeah, she really felt the mental pressure of that occasion. And I've already spent 10 minutes on the stream basically just talking about Gauff. But yeah, this was an interesting result that I think encapsulates everything that has been wrong with the hype of Gauff. She's talented, she's going places, but, you know, is she the best player left in the draw? She has chances now. She has chances to make the semis. There's always an unexpected semi-finalist at the Australian Open on the women's side. She has a chance to be that player. She has a chance to win the whole thing. But is she the best player in the event? Not at all. There are many players still left in, even though there have been upsets that are better than Coco Gauff as she is at the moment. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Gauff goes on to face Sofia Kenin. Kenin is a younger player, beat Serena Williams at the French Open, has more of a thick skin than other players, so maybe that is a matchup that will challenge Gauff more. But time will tell. Time will tell about the Osaka coaching situation. You know, Osaka's an extreme talent. She has the power game and she has depth beneath that, which makes it even more surprising that she did not seem to look for options against Gauff. I think, you know, with the situation at the US Open, potentially she made herself less intimidating to Gauff with the, you know, the way she has interacted with her. I think that it was an iffy move to part ways with Sasha Bayan, but I think there's also a deeper story to that split that people aren't aware of. So there will be deeper reasons. And the thing that Bayan does so well with the players that he works with is he makes their life his life. He works out with them. He does what they're doing. He has a big focus on the mental state and that side of things. And he's just all in 110% every minute of every day, it would seem. And he 100% becomes almost like a member of their family. And it is, I mean, maybe we should all just read Bayan's book because I'm sure it's in there, but he goes above and beyond with every player he works with. And in my opinion, while I disagree with one or two things he said recently, he is one of the best in the business. So that's where I stand on the whole Bayan thing. Finally moving on, but I'm sure that was a very interesting topic for most people. Let me know in the live chat, for those watching live, what you think of Gauff and what you think of the reception she's had and the hype she's had, because I think people are so intrigued by her because she thrives on these big stages. But actually, if you take a step back and forget her age for a moment, she's obviously a player that has been created to thrive in that environment. Being scheduled on big courts is helpful to her. She rises on the energy, and good for her. And one thing I would say is that because Gauff is so often compared to Serena and the Williams sisters who've paved the way for her, a lot of people have this mental image of her and they describe her as this big hitting power player. She's not that. The reason she was so great at putting so many balls in the court against Osaka is because she's, at the moment, she's more of a counterpuncher. She's very athletic. She covers the course incredibly well. She absorbs and redirects her opponent's power. I think that's what makes her a good player right now. She's not the biggest hitter by any means. So moving on from that one, next question. What do you think of Elise Mertens' chances against Simona Halep? The head-to-head is 1-2, with both of Halep's wins on clay. Mertens has made the third round or better in 9 consecutive slams. That's some decent consistency when you look at the rest of the tour, so credit to Mertens. Mertens is one of those players that has all the ability and you never quite know what she's going to produce on the day. She's got She's got a very decent serve. She's got the drop shot. She can go toe to toe with the big hitters from the baseline, and she knows what she wants to do on the court. A great example of how she can be so unpredictable is the fact that she lost to Heather Watson at the Hobart International, and the very next week she thrashed her at the Australian Open. So that's how quick the turnaround can be and how quickly she can learn from her mistakes. So I think Mertens does have chances against Halep. Obviously, she won that, I think it was the Qatar Open final early last year against Halep, when Halep was really the favourite to come through that, and Mertens produced one of the performances of her life. I think that the court speed here could have an impact. And at this point, I will refer back to my preview video. When I was making these predictions about Serena potentially being able to do well, Osaka doing well, I was under the impression that the courts would be playing a lot faster than they have been. I was in that video, which was quickly done, I must admit, I was almost writing off some of the counter punches, but actually, as is proved by, for example, John Millman, who's not necessarily a counterpuncher, but has a gritty style of play, pushing Roger Federer to the brink. These are actually conditions that the likes of Halep can thrive in. It is harder to completely cut through the court. And I think that could make this particular I'm tired. I think that could make this particular clash really interesting. So yeah, I think Mertens does have decent chances there, particularly with the seeds starting to drop like flies over the last couple of rounds, and Halep maybe being more aware of her opportunities. There will be more spotlight on her than there was previously. And when Halep had her great run to the Wimbledon title last year, she was quite under the radar coming into that event. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects Halep. But, you know, Halep is a superb player. She can change the way she plays in response to the opponent that she's facing. And I think a lot of this will have to do with Halep's fitness and Halep's mental state. I don't think it will all be on Mertens' racket for sure. So that's those two questions answered. I'm going to go to the live chat because I've seen some questions coming in, but I did also suggest that people leave questions on the last video that I did. So I'm going to take a look there as well and see some of the questions that have been asked. So let's see what you guys are saying. Thank you to everyone that's watching live. I appreciate it. Someone's agreeing Coco Gauff has potential, but if people hype her too early, she may struggle with the pressure. Fair point, but I think that she's shown mentally she is right up there. And I think mentally she's probably right up there above many of the women on tour. And it just goes to show you how much mentality is a key part of the game, because all these great players that are coming up against her are going to pieces because they haven't got it right up here. So, okay. Good question. How do you feel about Nadal versus Kyrgios? Rafael Nadal versus Nick Kyrgios in the fourth round. A popcorn match, of course. I have several feelings about this match. I haven't caught as much of Nadal so far as I would usually have done at a slam, but those who've been following the tournament will know he's progressed pretty easily. 6-2, 6-3, 6-love over Hugo Dellien in round one. Federico Del Boni in the second round, he beat 6-3, 7-6, 6-1. And then a very quick 6-1, 6-2, 6-4 defeat of the number 27 seed Pablo Carreño Busta. I've watched Dellien a fair bit over the last season, actually. He's a good player, likes to come into the net a lot and mix it up. So Nadal has faced a variety of opposition there, but no one that would be able to challenge him as much as Nick Kyrgios, clearly. Kyrgios, I caught the latter stages of his 5-set victory over Karen Khachanov, and I'm not going to say that I didn't think Nick would win that match, but the longer it went, the more impressive it became, because Kyrgios is not an endurance player by any means. He has really struggled with the best of five format in recent times when his matches have gone long. So he had a 4-set win over Gilles Simon in the second round. His first round was straights over Lorenzo Sonigo. And then that win over Khachanov, he had match points in 2 sets prior to the final set. And Khachanov nearly beat him from 2 sets to love down, but Kyrgios came through at 10-8 in the final match tiebreak. I heard there was some controversy with the DJ playing music at weird times to try and psych the crowd up for Nick. So that's interesting. But at the end of the day, the important takeaway for me from that match is that Kyrgios is not an endurance player. He's made for big hitting, quick wins generally, and he came through a match where he had chances to finish off a lot quicker than he did. So that shows a good mentality from Kyrgios, and it's been the head game that he's really struggled with for so long. But that is good stuff from Kyrgios to come through that match. What I would say about the Nadal versus Kyrgios match is that Nadal's path so far is exactly what he needs for this. Some people might think that Nadal needs to have been tested a bit to be put in trying situations for this clash with Kyrgios, but you'll remember me talking in the preview video about how Nadal was tired out ahead of this event, took part in 2 big team events and put his 150%, if that's even a thing, into those events. Hadn't had much of a break. So really for Nadal in Melbourne, the quicker he can get these wins, the better it is for him. Kyrgios, on the other hand, you know, even though he did come through that 3rd round win and it was impressive, I think that could affect him against Nadal, because however much he does get fired up against the big players, that was an over 4-hour win. He's still in the mixed doubles with Amanda Anisimova, so that's more tennis for him. And true, that could help him with seeing the ball well and staying in rhythm, etc. But, you know, he's still not the fittest player on tour. And let's look back to the Wimbledon meeting of theirs, which was hyped up no end. Kyrgios played, I thought, a brilliant match. 1 or 2 moments he wasn't there and Nadal penalised. Terrific level from Nadal. He was fired up for that match in a way I've not seen him fired up for a clash outside of team events in a long time. That was a whole different kind of energy from Nadal, because obviously there has been a bit of beef between these two in terms of comments that have been made about each other over the past year. So I think Nadal is ready for this. People will know that I did play down his chances here ahead of the events, but I didn't think the courts would be playing the way they are. And I think he's proving himself. So honestly, it's a clash that could go either way, but I do think that Kyrgios may regret how taxing that 3rd round match that could have been a straight sets win became, because that could cost him against a player who's so enduring and so intense as Nadal. It's a whole different game style as well with Nadal, with the high bouncing topspin. Nadal's going to need a big first serve percentage, that's for sure, or Kyrgios will be looking to attack. And one final thing, Kyrgios was actually missing quite a bit more than I expected him to be in the latter stages of that match with Khachanov. There were down the line shots from him that would usually be winners that he missed by about that much. So I think that's the kind of thing that Nadal would penalise that Khachanov maybe didn't. So they're things to keep in mind ahead of this clash, which should still be a good match, but Kyrgios might be a little bit fatigued for it, is what I'm thinking. Okay, let's have a look at some more questions. I don't quite understand that question. What's with all these one-sided decisions on the women's side? I don't know. Can Nick Kyrgios recover in time to compete against Rafa? I think I just answered that question. What do you think about Garbiñe Muguruza's 3rd round win? Okay, what do I think about Muguruza's wins here in general? I think it's typical, because the whole of last season I was saying Muguruza had such a terrible 2018 by her standards that she surely must have to win a slam this year, and she didn't. So we got to the Australian Open and I was thinking about my picks and I thought, well, she didn't pick up last year, then what have I got to go off? So I didn't mention Muguruza's name at all, and here she is, beating Svitolina in thumping fashion and making the 4th round. So given the way I wrote off Petra Kvitova and Garbiñe Muguruza a little bit ahead of this slam, after having those two as my main picks, 2 of them throughout last season, would be super typical if it's Kvitova versus Muguruza in the final now. But I think with Muguruza is, she's such a good player, you know, she's won multiple slams. She had such a great mentality when she was young. She's got the power game and she's got the athleticism as well. The talent never dies. She's just obviously not been in the right headspace to produce. And if she can sort that out, then yes, she can bring a fantastic performance out of the blue. I think that the win over Svitolina definitely puts her on people's radars, because Svitolina has been really consistent at the slams over the last year or so. So It will be interesting to see, like with Halep, how she handles that spotlight, but I have good feelings. I hardly dare say it, but I do have good feelings about Muguruza. You know, she has the game to thrive anywhere. She's not really done too much at the Australian Open in times past, but there's always a first time. So, yeah, I think that was an impressive third round win for Muguruza, but at the same time, honestly, I don't see why players have so much trouble with Svitolina, because I think there are players that execute a sharper game than her that should be beating her more often. Thank you to those asking people to like the video. I never really ask for likes and stuff, but that does help. On that note, if you're here and you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now, because that's the only way you'll keep up with how I'm uploading next week. I usually would do preview and predictions videos for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and final, but because I've watched less tennis than I usually would, and given how my women's predictions went ahead of the event, probably wouldn't be too smart of me to preview and predict the quarterfinals. I think it would be more of a waste of people's time. So I think I'll probably either do another live Q&A, or I might just leave the uploads until semifinals and final. So let me know what you would prefer. Okay. More questions on Osaka versus Gauff. Osaka won against her at the US Open last year, so what was the difference? Again, I think part of the difference is the way Osaka responded to Gauff, and it sounds awful saying it because Osaka was so lovely to Gauff after that win, and she went up to her and she obviously brought her on court for the on-court interview after the match, and she turned to her team and said how pleased she was for them and what a great job they were doing. And back in the day in women's tennis, 10 or so years ago, it was such a mean field and everyone was fighting for themselves, and there wasn't so much kind of palliness among the players, if I can use that word, friendliness even. And while it's nice that, you know, they are more supportive of each other now, I think there just wasn't that intimidation factor with Osaka for Gauff that there was when they faced off at the US Open. I think Osaka had kind of weakened the barrier a little bit, and I think she certainly felt that herself because of the way she'd responded to Gauff there. There was even more of a hype surrounding the build-up to this match, and clearly Osaka felt that and was not in the mental state to deal with it. So it's a very deep, kind of complex situation and discussion to have. So it's really interesting. She is fearless, Coco Gauff, and that is part of why she's getting these great results, a massive part. Okay. Still trying to catch up with your questions. My biggest surprise so far was Stefanos Tsitsipas losing to Milos Raonic. What has been the biggest surprise on the men's or women's side for you so far this year at the Australian Open? Curious to know. Good question. I wasn't so surprised by Tsitsipas losing to Raonic because, as I said, picked Raonic as my dark horse. He's lacked fitness. That has been the issue for Raonic. It was his serve and volley tennis that was absolutely killing at the Australian Open in 2016, 3 years before Tsitsipas made that run last year. And that was the first time I think Tsitsipas had really faced a fit Raonic. So that was probably a bit of a shock to the system for him. So I can see Raonic going further. The biggest surprise on the men's or women's side, I've got to say, I did not think that Serena was playing well at all against Tamara Zidansek, but I was pretty shocked to see. No, I don't like the word shocked because it was more like an, oh, didn't expect it to happen here. But I did not think Serena would lose to Wang Qiang if she was going to lose here. Now, Serena beat Tamara Zidansek in straight sets. I tweeted afterwards that if she played with that level again, she was not going to win the tournament, and I got trashed for that opinion by a few people, but hey, she went out next round. So the thing is that Wang and Zidansek, two different players. Zidansek doesn't have the flat lethal power of Wang that the Chinese player was able to use to expose Serena's movement. And I've said it time and time again, if Serena's going to go down, it's going to be because an opponent has made her run. But Serena absolutely thrashed Wang Qiang at the US Open. If that had not happened, I would have been less surprised by this result, because when they were going to face off at the US, I looked at that draw and I thought, oh, potentially interesting, because I've charted Wang for a few years. I've seen her live on a grass court. I think I might even have seen her playing in qualifying when I first saw her a few years ago. And I was like, how is this woman not ranked higher than she is? Because when she's landing her shots, it is lethal. And that's what she did against Serena. She played the match of her life. She remained composed in the pressure moments, and she stepped into the court, went for her shots, ran Serena around. That was exactly what she needed to do, and she delivered. Serena at the moment can't cope in that situation, because that's when surely she starts thinking about records and gets tight and gets frustrated. From what I saw of her match against Wang, she threw up some red flags for her opponent and gave her hope, because she was getting frustrated over the smallest things. She was looking decent in the early stages in the first set, and then she started to get visibly frustrated over a couple of misses, and her opponent, composed opponent, was able to cotton onto that and step up and take her chances. So that one was quite a surprising result, and I think Serena was surprised by it herself. But on the men's side, do you know what? You haven't said that this has to be a loss. So the biggest surprise for me was Federer beating Millman from the position that he was in, okay? I said before this tournament that Federer was one of my front runners. I thought that the situation with him having no Grand Slams to defend would put him in a freer mental headspace, and that he'd be more able to produce. But when Millman won that first set, I thought, oh, not good for Federer, because obviously Millman got that win over Federer in conditions at the US Open that were less than ideal for Federer in 2018. And he had an Australian crowd there. Yes, there was a lot of support for Federer, but there was still energy for Millman as well. And when it got to the fifth set, this was kind of the matches that Millman always wins, and Federer generally loses these days, because Federer has more weight on his shoulders when it gets to that position in a match. Millman has so much to gain, and Federer is hanging on and sometimes playing so that he doesn't lose as opposed to playing to win. I didn't watch a lot of that one live. I watched bits live. This was while I was working at the tournament, so I caught what I could, and then I watched back. The things that I saw in terms of technically were that Federer was struggling to really swing with his backhands, because Millman was serving well and serving smartly. He was mixing up big serves with shorter serves, and Federer didn't know how to judge that, but Millman was targeting the backhand a fair bit, and Federer was often forced to chop the backhand and let Millman control a rally, because he couldn't swing through his backhands because he was inside the baseline. So when Federer was inside the baseline, if he tried to fully swing through with his backhand, he was generally hitting long or hitting wide or misjudging, and that put him in a frustrating situation. But to go back to why that particular result was a surprise for me, Federer just doesn't win that kind of match really anymore. And, you know, he looked shocked himself after winning that match. He said that he was thinking about how to explain himself in press. Millman was going for his shots. He was doing everything he needed to do with consistency. And at 8-4 in the tiebreak, I thought it was done. I don't mind admitting that. I thought Federer was going out in round 3, and Millman just blinked at the end. And I'm not saying that Federer was completely lucky to get through. He did step up and serve big to close that gap in the tiebreak, but there was definitely a moment or two at the back end of that match where Millman blinked and Federer had it, and I think that's something that Federer kind of admitted to himself. So that was a surprise for me, that Millman from that position in the 5th set, having led by a break as well, didn't come through with the win. But as I tweeted, I think it's huge for Federer, just mentally having come through a match that he these days just generally doesn't tend to come through. So a surprise, but probably massive for Federer going into the rest of this tournament and potentially the rest of the season. So there are my surprises. Oh, the big question. Do you think Serena Williams will ever win number 24? Honestly, it depends how much she wants it and how much she's putting into it. I can't comment on what Serena is doing off the court because I don't see all of it. Obviously, life has changed for her somewhat since she gave birth, got married. She has more in her life now. But what I do genuinely think is it's not so much about what she's capable of as how much she wants it, because Serena has made those 4 Grand Slam finals since coming back after giving birth. She still has the ability. I think she still has the fitness. Obviously, she has to take more time out with injuries now, but I think she's scheduled smartly for the slams. But I do think she's got to the point where she can't necessarily just rock up and play the slams anymore. She probably does have to smartly schedule in lead-up events. And I think this is a massive learning process for her at this Australian Open. She did not expect to lose this match. I can't imagine that she expected to lose to Wang Qiang. So I can't say for sure. What I know is that I've never written Serena off. I think that on her best day, she's still the best player on tour and the best player in history on the women's side. And I think that time will tell. But the longer it goes on, the harder it's going to be mentally and physically. Let's see. How did Madison Keys lose so meekly? Good question. I've got to say, I don't know. I did not see her loss. But, she did have a deep run prior to the tournament, and while coming runner-up in Brisbane was helpful to Kerber when she won the title. Sometimes it's just not good to peak ahead of the events. And who did Keys lose to? I'm just checking this. Maria Sakkari. Okay, so Sakkari is quite a tough draw. She's a good hitter. She can be creative on the court as well. So, yeah, maybe people weren't expecting Keys to go down in straight sets, but tough draw in Sakkari, to be fair. And Keys, ahead of this season, hadn't been too much on anyone's radar, even since she made that US Open final 2017. She's not done a heck of a lot since, to be honest. So maybe she was overly hyped coming into the event, and I ask forgiveness if I played a part in that. Okay, someone says Millman was cheating in that match. He was wetting the ball, rolling it on his shirt on every serve. While that is not ideal and doesn't look great, I don't think it's illegal. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to do everything you can to win a match. But I do have to say I was quite disappointed watching that match by John Millman. He's a player I have an absolute ton of respect for. I've met him at least once or twice. He's one of the nicest guys on tour. He's so genuine. You see the way he interacts with people. But when I was watching him during that match, it felt like I was watching a different player. The way he was kind of striding around, overreacting at Federer's unforced errors, smirking, chewing gum. Haven't really seen that before. I just didn't feel like I was watching John Millman. It was a strange one. And I didn't think he needed to go to those extremes. He'd beaten Federer at a Grand Slam before. He didn't need to play games, so to speak, to get that win. I think that he'd have been fine just being him. And that's my opinion on that. But as far as wetting the ball goes to try and make it travel faster, might not look good, but I don't think it's against the rules. So can't really come at him for that. What are my picks? You probably don't want to know my picks at the moment, given the way the preview went. So I'll leave that one for now. Let's see. Barty is playing best, though, says someone. Ashley Barty has huge chances now, and I did think that she would be the exception when it came to the success of Aussie women in Melbourne. She's just too talented not to go deep. There is more spotlight on her, but she's so well grounded on and off the court that I think she should be able to handle that. She's not had such a testing draw so far, so I think we'll see where Barty's really up to as we move into the second week, and there is more pressure and more expectation, but she's certainly looking strong at the moment. Nadal ball girl, yeah, that was sweet. What do I think about Federer's tough win? Just commented. What's your job when you're not tennis vlogging? Okay, so just in brief, I do a lot of commentating, mainly for the WTA, but I've done some ATP Challenger as well, and will hopefully be doing some ATP in the near future. I do a lot of social media for events. Sometimes I work in organization at events in terms of getting players where they need to be and so on and so forth. But a lot of the time I'm interviewing or doing, videos for social media and that kind of thing. But the main I don't know the word. Mainly what I do at the moment is commentating. That's kind of my most regular thing. But because I freelance, I do a lot of different things, all within tennis, and that's a lot of fun for me because I don't get bored. So yeah, I enjoy what I do. Does Iga Swiatek have a chance? Yes, she does. A promising young player, Swiatek, just beat Donna Vekic, who had a great confidence-boosting win over Maria Sharapova in the first round. So that's a tough loss for Vekic, but Swiatek has been on people's radars for the past year or so, has quite a bit going on in her game. So she definitely has as much of a chance as many other players in the draw, I would say. Biggest shock for me is that Belinda Bencic won only one game against Kontaveit. Yeah, I did not expect Bencic to go down so quickly. Who did I see her playing against? Her previous match, Ostapenko. I saw part of Bencic's match against Ostapenko. She seemed calm, sure of herself, knew that Ostapenko was going to be hot and cold and not give her a rhythm, and seemed really prepared for that. So to go down to Kontaveit so easily is, yeah, a bit of a surprise. Lightning prediction round. Oh, I'm not sure if I can do that because I don't trust myself to do a good job of that. I'm going to leave that for now, if you don't mind. I like to make predictions when I've watched a significant amount of tennis leading up and can actually be more reliable. The reason 2019 was such a great year of predictions for me, I think, was because I'd watched so much tennis and done so much analysis. So don't want to risk that one quite yet, but hopefully by the time we get to semis, final, I'll be in a good place to do so. Did I ever play tennis? Not professionally, but I do play and have played for a number of years, and hopefully I'm not too terrible. Kenin versus Gauff. Yeah, Kenin hopefully has the thick skin to hold herself together a bit more than Gauff's previous opponents have, but yeah, we'll see. Okay, I'm just gonna quickly look at the previous video that I did and see if any comments and questions have been left there, and then I'm going to wrap up because I've already been here longer than I said I would be. I do remember a couple of questions being asked, so I'm just trying to... Okay, so someone mentioned about how I never mentioned Andrei Rublev in the preview video. I wanted to mention Rublev, but I was trying to keep the video to a watchable length, unlike this one, so I didn't mention him. Rublev, I had at the back of my mind as a young player that could potentially do damage at the Australian Open. The reason I didn't mention him was because while his form leading into this slam and his form over the last few months has been really impressive, he won 2 titles coming into this event, I just didn't know if he had the best of 5 experience to really do damage here. But he is proving that he's up to the task, and I'm just going to drag up his results here so far, but he steps up and he's carried on his form over best of 5 set format, just beat David Goffin, the number 11 seed, from a set down, including 2 tie breaks, and he's looking good. He now faces Alexander Zverev, and I think that will be a very telling match for both players. Zverev has done incredibly well, moving into the 4th round without dropping a set after having some really poor form by his standards over the past few months. And I think this is exactly what Zverev needs. Just prior to the Australian Open, I noticed that he put a post on Instagram saying about a message to his fans, basically saying, I can't promise that I'm going to win every match. It's obvious that I'm not in great form at the moment, but I do promise to give my 110% every time. And not just that post, but his whole mentality coming into the tournament, I think took a huge weight off his shoulders because he did not come in under the same expectation. And just saying those words himself, I think, took some internal pressure off him to really perform. And I think because, and it's funny to say it, because of the poor form he's had ahead of the event, I think he was in his best mental state to produce coming into this slam than he has been in some time. So the Rublev clash will be interesting for Zverev because he might almost view himself as a bit of an underdog when you look at the form of both players coming into this tournament. So Rublev versus Zverev will be a very, very interesting clash to keep an eye on even. I'll keep this to the Australian Open for now. So, I remember someone asking about Anisimova. I think someone asked about okay, have you had a chance to watch Jannik Sinner or Amanda Anisimova in the last couple of months? What do you think of their chances at the Australian Open? I commentated on Anisimova's first match of the year at the ASB Classic on Stadium Court. She looked really good, but again, the courts were playing slower than she would have liked in Melbourne, and she's had a rough time of it recently with her father passing away suddenly shortly before the US Open last year. There's just a lot going on, so I think Anisimova is incredibly talented. I think she's better than most, if not all, of the young players on tour at the moment, and I think her time will come, but it just, nothing was in the right place for her coming into this tournament. As far as Jannik Sinner goes, again, you know, promising young player, but he is still quite young, and I think he needs to grow a bit, basically, and get a bit more experience before he's really dangerous over best of 5. He lost to Martin Fucsovics in straight sets in the second rounds, but you know, Fucsovics is in great form, so that's not a bad loss at all. And I think that we'll wrap up there. So thank you very much to everyone that has tuned in live. Thank you to everyone that still supports the channel when my predictions are a bit off. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do that now. I'm very sorry that the first stream crashed, but I've stayed a bit longer on here than I intended to make up for it. Happy Australia Day. Hope you've enjoyed the first week of the Australian Open. Keep up with next week. I will be much more in depth, hopefully, for coming videos, and subscribe because I'm not fully sure when I will be back, but it will be before the end of the Australian Open. So thank you for sticking around. Thank you for tuning in. And whenever it may be, I will see you next time.